session, everyone, and I'll see you at the end. Over to you, Phil.
Okay, just making sure that you can hear me first of all. You just say if you can hear me okay. We did test the volume earlier, and hopefully it's the right volume, not too loud and not too quiet. Okay, right, okay, I'll make a start. Well, thank you, Sean, for that introduction. By way of an introduction to what I'm going to talk about today, I'll say that I met with Sean almost a year ago. It was at the ITEFL conference up in Glasgow. We sat around the table, had a meal, and he first proposed this series of wellbeing sessions for International House. And he'd obviously picked up the idea and me take part. So it's been almost a year in the making. So we finally got round to presenting it. And the timing of it is very interesting because it's about a month before the ITEFL conference. And I'll be giving a talk there on the same topic there. Today's session, well, first I want to find out from you, can I ask a question? It's been advertised mostly to International House staff or teachers. Can I just check, do you work at International House at the moment or have a connection with International House? Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. I must say, yeah, that's an IH teacher is fine. Yeah, okay. Yeah, a lot of people have worked with International House, currently do or have done in the past, or have some connection with the organisation. I've never personally worked for International House, although I did once get invited to the original Cordoba International House. I think it was the first or the original one in Cordoba in Spain. My friend Rene, who worked for International House down there, invited me. So I have seen, so that's my very tenuous connection. And I was at Barcelona, International House Barcelona conference just last month for the Learning Technologies Special Interest Group. Okay, today what I'm going to do is I'm going to pose some questions around the topic that you can see on your screen. And as Sean said, some of them might be of a sensitive nature. So if you haven't already anonymized yourself or made your name anonymous, then you're happy to be recorded and your comments on record. But what I would like you to do is to interact. I don't want this to be a one-way talk. I want this to be a webinar where I ask questions and you comment, use the chat box, and I'll be asking questions and I need to have your comments and your feedback. I'm going to be asking some of the questions that I raised in my survey, which I'll go on to talk about first. First of all, I need to just do an introduction about me for those that don't know me. I call this a little bit about me or some personalization. What you can see there is a censored photo of my actual diary, and I wrote that on the 10th of October. I've obviously censored it because there's some personal information about the organisations and the places where I've worked. But in total, 12 times, I've counted, it was 11 then in October 2016, and it's now 12 times in my teaching career that I've either left a job early or not completed my contract or been successful in an interview and then not started because I had some feelings about not being confident enough to teach or do the job. And so I feel I come from a position of experience in terms of personal experience of suffering from poor mental health in my teaching career. I've left a 2-week teaching for English academic purposes course on the first day. It cost over £1,000 and I didn't complete it. It's nothing against the organisation that did it. They were great. They tried to support me, but and they tried to offer me to do it again, but I just wasn't able to do it. So I never completed it, never went back. I've been to 3 conferences in my time where poor mental health has got the better, or my poor mental health has got the better of me. They include ITEFL in Liverpool in 2013, when I was wandering around. For a long time I was holed up in my hotel room, unable to leave. I just couldn't bring myself to open the door of my hotel room and leave the room because I was full of anxiety about just being exposed and being in public. And I also remember that week being in Liverpool, wandering around Liverpool in a bit of a daze, not knowing who I was or what I was doing, until I was rescued, I think on the Friday, by somebody who knows who she is or they are, and helped me to confront my fears and go and take part in the rest of the conference. I spent 2 weeks in 2012, straight after my master's dissertation was completed. I spent 2 weeks in a priory clinic. And I also spent, in the first part of 2013, I spent a week in a secure unit in Norfolk. That was because I was a danger to myself and potentially to others. I wasn't sectioned. They call it sectioned when the police get involved. I wasn't sectioned. I went there voluntarily, but I was advised to go there, and I spent a week. Not a happy time. I was even there on my birthday, and probably the most unpleasant birthday I've ever had. My symptoms have generally been anxiety and panic attacks. And as I begin to describe my feelings of anxiety, they often mushrooms into a panic cycle or a panic attack, which is where a lot of physical symptoms, which you hyperventilate, you can go numb, and you have a lot of racing thoughts. So catastrophic, racing, or irrational thinking often is symptomatic of having a panic attack. And over the time, I've had to learn how to deal with it. I've not always been successful in dealing with the attacks when they happen, the anxiety attacks when they happen. And there are a number of reasons for it. There's not just one thing, although one thing can trigger it off, and then it can spiral out of control. I've had plenty of counselling over the years, and this predates me as a teacher. It's not that teaching caused this. I think a lot of people are vulnerable or susceptible to these kinds of symptoms, and I think I've always been vulnerable to these, or more susceptible to them. I've had therapy, mostly cognitive behavioural therapy, and even one time tried some hypnotherapy. Not that had much success. In 2012, I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, which is a very sort of catch-all term. It is, as the name suggests, generalized. It's not a sexy diagnosis like schizophrenia or bipolar. It's a sort of catch-all. It's quite common to be diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. And I'll come on to talking about diagnosis in a minute. I've also had long periods of depression. And again, as I say, this doesn't just happen since I've become a teacher. It's not teaching necessarily that's caused it, but I've had long periods before and since I've been a teacher where depression has got the better of me. And I've also had long periods of being underemployed. I won't say unemployed. I've always done something, but underemployed, when I've been off the radar, not been earning any money. And pretty much 2014, I can't remember much of 2014. I was probably unemployed for the whole year. And that's what means that I've taken decisions more recently to not teach abroad and to do other things, which mean that I've taken more control about what I do, such as going self-employed and only working in my home county and keeping things closer to home. Back in 2013, I was underemployed, and I ended up volunteering for an organisation called Mind. And Mind is a mental health charity, and I was for 18 months on and off a volunteer teacher there, or teacher's assistant there. And I've also campaigned for the organisation Time to Change. And if I stand up, I'm showing you my T-shirt, which is Time to Change, which is a campaign to end stigma with mental health. And I campaigned on 2 or 3 Time to Talk days. Okay. I'd like to show you just a quote from a book, and I invite you to read it. I won't read it, I'll let you read it, and then if you could make some comment in the box about what you see. I'll tell you in just a moment, Slew, which book it was taken from. Yeah, as some people are saying, they agree with the sentiments of this writer, or that we like to treat teachers as humans, as persons, people, not commodities, part of a business, although a lot of work in businesses. Hi, Lucy, and hi, Adam. Thanks for commenting. Yeah, often the bosses claim that they really care, but in real life it's different. Yeah. Okay. I'll reveal where this comes from. It comes from a book called The Elephant in the Classroom, and it was written by a religious studies teacher, head of department in a secondary school in Stoke. And although it wasn't written for English language teachers, I think the things that he talked about in the book are relevant for English language teachers. And I like the title, The Elephant in the Staff Room. And I think mental health is one of those issues that I would describe as an elephant in the staff room for sure. I think we might be getting better at talking about it, but I think we possibly are still long way short of where we need to be. So as I say, that's Chris Eyre, and it's called The Elephant in the Staff Room, How to Reduce Stress and Improve Teacher Wellbeing. Okay, I'm going to go on and talk now about my research. Now, if you don't already know about what I did, well, it first started off with about a year ago, around Time to Talk Day, which was February 2017. I wrote a blog post. Now, don't read this. You're not expected to read. It's very, very small. So I'm just showing you there because it's a screen grab from my blog. And it was an interview that I gave around that time about my own mental health. It was the first time I'd gone public in any way about the issues and struggles that I'd personally had during my teaching career. I subsequently I subsequently decided to do a talk at conference and give this webinar. And then later on in the year, I did some research where I conducted a survey. I put it on my blog and I got people to share it, and about mental health and English language teaching. I was specifically investigating this issue of mental health and English language teachers specifically, although it's applicable to language teachers, it's not just English teachers. And this research was begun on the 1st of December last year, and within a week it was completed by 156 people. Within 24 hours it had been completed by 156. Within 48 hours it had been completed by 256. And by the 21st December, after 3 weeks, I had to stop it because I'd gone over 500. That's 500 responses to my survey. And we're not talking about kind of statistics here. We're talking about qualitative information where people have open-ended questions. And if I take out the number of repeated response, either informants or respondents who said the same thing twice, I got it down to 501 individual responses from around the world. And I subsequently posted about this on my blog on the 31st December, giving some feedback. There's a survey link there, which I can't currently embed into the chat, but you can go onto my web page, which you can see at the bottom, and I'll give a link at the end. And that will, and you go back into December the 31st is when I published some links to other people who had written about this topic. And I also noticed there that I also put there that I had to use, at all times, I had to use some recommendations. It came from the British Association of Applied Linguistics, and they had some recommendations for dealing with confidential information and sensitive data. And I've tried my best to follow their recommendations, because a lot of the information that I gathered was obviously of a very sensitive nature. It could be totally anonymous. They could be confidential. People didn't have to reveal who they were. Although about 150 out of the 500 people did actually put their names because they wanted to link to something they'd written or wanted to be contacted afterwards. But for the most part, people did it anonymously. I don't know who they were, although I do know a little bit about their professional background in teaching, and that's what I'm going to come on to. Okay, so let's just get rid of that arrow. So I'm going to come on to survey questions, some of the survey questions. There isn't time today to look at all of them, but I'd like to give you, for the very first time, some of the information that I collected from the survey, and to ask you some of the questions yourselves before I give you some of the responses that I received. The first question was a kind of data gathering exercise where I said, what is your role in English language teaching? People just ticked a box or a number of boxes, because we're never just one thing. We can be just teachers, but we could also be teachers or teacher trainers or writers, or some of us are freelance, some of us are school owners. And in the end, it was mostly teachers that filled in my survey, a lot of teacher trainers, course directors, a few language school owners, and quite a lot of freelancers as well. The second question was, how long have you been in the English teaching profession? Well, that's just a pie chart. Sorry if you can't see that very clearly. It's not very clear on my screen, but basically a wide range of people who had just started out or had a few years, or in some cases more than 11, more than over 20 years in some cases. Now, I'm going to, sorry, just jumping ahead. I'm going to move on to the first question, which I'd like to ask you. I'd like you to put a comment in the comment box if you could, and that's this. Do you have, or have you ever had, a diagnosed mental health condition? Now, in the survey, I said, if so, could you please indicate what this is in your own words? For the purpose of this webinar, maybe if you could just say yes or no, or very, very briefly what it is in the comments box. Okay, so mostly so far no or none. Some people mentioned they've had depression, burnout. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, okay, I'll just give that a moment more. A burnout as well. Yeah, I think a lot of teachers and teacher trainers have suffered from burnout. It's a common one. Often that is a diagnosis that people are given by a medical professional. Obviously, by diagnosed, I'm talking about medical professionals actually saying you have got this condition, or you have got this this issue. In my survey, well, this is really much. It's a sample of what I got. This is not everything and everything that I received. More than half, around 325 people said no or none. But they were still interested in taking the survey nonetheless. Now, what I did a very rough kind of word count of the keywords that I found, and you can see, I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can see the most common words that were used when people described their diagnosed condition. Some of them talked about, a lot of them talked about anxiety, a lot of them relating to depression. People might have used the word burnout in other ways, but in the next question, you'll see that was probably more common to use it for the next question that's coming up. Some people talk about suicidal ideation, that idea where you think about and contemplate the idea of taking your own life. A couple of people said dystony, and I had to look up dystony. I didn't know what that was, and I think it was a different word for something called dysthymia, I think it is. I've probably got the pronunciation wrong, which is a kind of depressive mood order. Okay, the next question was related, but as you might expect, it was about, do you feel that you suffer from an undiagnosed mental health issue? And again, I'd like you to comment in the box if this is undiagnosed. Okay, so we've got anxiety, yeah. ADHD, okay, that could be an actual diagnosis. And sometimes you think, okay, I'm suffering from something like attention. If you don't know, ADHD is attention deficiency syndrome. Probably panic attacks. Yeah, I think if you have a panic attack, you probably know that you're having one, but sometimes you haven't got something to label it or a word for what you're actually going through. Yeah, burnout, stress, anxiety, feeling overwhelmed. I think that's common. So with burnout, the feeling of being overwhelmed, too much on your plate, too much happening in your life, can affect you. So, okay, let's look at what they said in the survey. Again, it was a very similar number that said no or none. So they were consistent there. Slightly different word count, 54 depression or depressed. Again, anxiety rated high. Stress now. People just said stress or stress related. Tiredness or burnout, which a few of you already mentioned. Addiction it is. People often don't talk about being addicted to something, but that can be a problem. Borderline personality disorder as another one. And again, this is just a sample of the responses. This is not, remember there were 501 individual responses, and that people described their symptoms in their own way. Some people said insomnia, insomnia, not being able to sleep. Short-term memory loss was another thing. These were open-ended questions. I didn't put any limit. It wasn't a tick box exercise. I wanted to be as qualitative as possible in my research. Okay, now we're going to come on to what I call the nitty-gritty of this webinar, because the questions that are coming up, I hope, kind of make you think about the idea and the issue of mental health, and what you say about a condition, if you either diagnose or undiagnosed, that you suffer from. And this is the question. I'll let you read the question, and I'll let you just comment in the box in your own time. Hopefully you can see it. Okay, so we're starting to get some answers, and this is exactly what I was kind of expecting. A difference of opinion. Some people say no. They fear what their managers that they're not understanding. Some people say it depends on the extent or the condition would impact upon the work. That is a very key thing. Is it going to impact? No. Feel the employer wouldn't know how to deal with it. Yes, in the past. Probably not. Depends on the organisation, level of trust with the other person. So it depends on your line manager or who you're working for. No, says Nick, would feel that it would be seen as affecting my ability to do the job. Okay, undiagnosed anxiety. No, okay, so more people say no or very doubtful than yes. Not many people would think it's a positive thing. And I'll put some responses that I received in just a minute. In fact, no, I'll do that now. I'll put some of the responses that I received in the survey now as I continue to read the comments that people are making. These are actual quotes, obviously anonymized quotes from people from my survey. So Mary says, yes, I'd be wary of getting turned down just because of that, regardless of other qualifications. But at the same time, I'm going to need some kind of support or understanding. Okay. Yeah, somebody says I'd prefer to disclose it with a GP or psychiatrist and see if they thought it could work. I think for a lot of people, it depends on the situation and who you're working for or going to work for. One more. Okay, so again, these are I think I got 486 individual responses to this question. So apologies for only putting 4, but for brevity, I'm only going to show you just a small sample of those people that responded. Now, you may see that on here, all the people, comment about not being trained to deal with it. Yeah, this is an issue. The fact of lack of training in organisations is often the stumbling block here. That you don't feel that the other person would be able to cope with it, the line manager or the owner of the school. As you can see, all these are no responses, but for sake of balance, I want to show you a few yes responses as well. So the same question. Would you disclose it up front or in an interview? Here's some of the reasons that people gave for the other view. And again, if you want to comment, feel free to comment. Seems from these comments and other comments that I received or responses that I received that a lot of people would rather be upfront and say, okay, I've got this. I mean, if you've got a physical ailment, you've got a physical disability, then it's easier to go, well, you can point to the physical disability that if it's seeable, there's a visible one. And you can say, well, I've got this problem, and you need to accommodate for me. A lot of people talked about certain employment rights, and you're not allowed to discriminate against people because they've got a disability, and you must accommodate them at all points. Whether we are on the same parity of esteem with mental health as we are with physical health. Okay, I'm just going to allow people to make a comment if they wish. Yeah, okay, sorry. Definitely depends on the employer. Many language schools are small businesses and resources. Yeah, it's quite true that a lot of language schools are very small businesses, and they depend upon the teachers being well, being fit, and able to do their jobs. And for a lot of the time, it comes down to, I think somebody mentioned it earlier, it comes down to whether your mental health condition would affect your ability to work. And in the spirit of disclosure, I will now say that I once disclosed it upfront towards the end of an interview when I was interviewed for a job in Dalian in China. And the guy responded, he took some time to think about it, and he responded by saying, well, as long as it doesn't affect your ability to do your job. You know, and that seems to be the kind of get out clause for somebody hiring, is to say, well, you know, if we're not going to discriminate you, it would be wrong to discriminate you, although in some cultures there is severe discrimination, I would argue. But the point is that it can still, even a full disclosure up front can still result in the issue of a manager not being very understanding when your mental health condition poor mental health condition gets the better of you. Okay, I'm going to move on. I'm going to look at another question from the survey. I'm just waiting to see what Mary's saying, but I can come back to that in just a minute. The next question I will put on the screen had 501 responses. So every single person responded to this question. Nobody left this blank. And I have to thank at this point Sarah Mercer for suggesting this question, because it wasn't a question I originally thought of, but Sarah, who's giving the webinar next week, suggested this as a variation on this as a possible question. And I'll ask the question first, and then I'll let you comment in the comment box your response to the question. Okay, and please comment in the chat box. Try and keep them short answers, please, because there might be a few. Okay. Okay, let's deal with Mary's comment from the last question. Yeah, makes sense to how it affects your ability to do your job. Yeah, very true, Mary. Thank you for your comment and taking your time to comment as well, Mary. Yeah. It's not just about covering for someone, but also about having to provide the support for them too, with the best in the will and the yeah. Because practical and logistical concerns, it's not always practical and possible to provide the full support that's needed for money or other or time constraints or training, lack of training, as Nick said earlier. Okay, so people are starting to fill in comments to this question about the cause of stress. I think this could be a number of things for many people. Marking, admin, too much admin, perfectionism. That's the first time we've heard the word perfectionism today. I know I've been guilty of that in the past. I've had to learn not to be a perfectionist, Zorro. Unpredictability, timetables, long hours, pressure from manager, teaching hours, precarious working conditions. Okay, that's the first mention, Kieran. Thank you for that. Precarious, unreliable, tenuous working conditions. We don't always know what the sort of situation. Living in a foreign country as well. I made the decision not to work abroad anymore because I can't speak the local language or deal with the local culture. Feedback, stress can be caused by management issues. Yeah, uncertainty of income, feeling lonely. Yeah, homesickness. Isolation, feeling lonely, Mary. Good. Yeah, lack of social contact, meeting. I've certainly suffered from that in my time. Yeah, being away from family for long periods. It's very common for a lot of TEFLers, especially backpacker, first-time TEFLers who go out there into the world and enjoy the ride but get homesick. A lack of communication, very high expectations of self. Yeah, disrespect. Okay, disrespect or achievements, not knowledge. Okay, that's an interesting one, Olga, and I think that's one of the things mentioned below. Lucy's typing. I'll just give it a couple more moments. Yeah, okay, good point. Okay, let me show you just some of the words, some of the phrases that people said in the survey. Remember, 500 people responded, and a lot of them duplicated their answers, like had the same response, but they also described it in their own way. Oh, press the wrong button. There we go. Just some of the common words or phrases that people mention. I'll let you look at those and you can comment on those if you want. As you can see, some of the words you've already mentioned in the chat box, such as homesickness, poor working conditions, perfectionism right at the top there, job insecurity. For many people, they don't know, they have either 0 hours contracts now in the UK, or they have very sort of not abusive or absurd contracts, which puts the employer or the language school first and the teacher. Yeah. Bullying, yeah. Harassment and bullying. A lot of people commented how either that they've been harassed at work or they've been bullied at work, and it is often a very undiscussed, unmentioned thing. I had one respondent who shall remain nameless forever, who responded and basically gave me a life story about how he had been bullied in the workplace and how it caused him to have a nervous breakdown. Yeah, a lot of these ring well, they do, Kira. Misbehaving students, yeah, misbehaving students, unruly students, especially young kids or teenagers, particularly, possibly less so with adults. The contracts written in foreign. I've had that experience, Lucy. Contracts written in foreign. I had a contract that was written wholly in Chinese when I worked in Beijing. And I had to get a member of staff to basically translate what it said. And I was signing something, and I was kind of signing my life away because I didn't know what I was signing. Yeah. Thanks, Nick, for picking up imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome. If you don't know what that is, that feeling that you don't deserve to be there. I mean, I've suffered from this in the past, especially early on. Think I'm not qualified, despite this piece of paper. I don't feel qualified to do this. And I've certainly struggled at times to think, well, I don't deserve to be there. I'm an imposter. They're going to find me out. I'm a fraud. They're going to find me out at some point. That I can't do my job. And that anxiety that plays on your mind. Okay, Sandra says there's a new law in Portugal against bullying and harassment in Portugal. That's interesting. Thank you. No imposter. Okay, thanks. Okay, good. Let's move on to the next part. I'll just give you I'll just for a moment just deal with this issue of stress and some stresses. I'll just give you 4 quotes. I said some people gave me their life story when they responded, and so this is exactly the same question as before. But what I'm doing is I'm picking 4 of the real answers that people gave me. I'll let you read those in your own time. Another? Another? And a final one. Yes, Lucy, lack of respect as well. So just not having that degree of respect that you would expect. In some countries, some cultures, teachers are put up there. They're called doctors. Even if you haven't got a doctorate, they call you doctor because you feel you're really learned and you've got something to offer, and you're respected. But in many situations, it's not the case. Not being a real teacher. Yeah. Yeah, I can resonate with a lot of these comments and thoughts. Yeah, Nick says the lack of status in the profession can add to the feeling of inadequacy. Yeah, this is true too. Yes, thank you, Kieran. The fact that teachers are expected to behave in a professional way at all times. You know, mustn't let the stress get to you. Even though if you are stressed, you mustn't show it to the children or the kids or the learners or your line manager. You know, it wouldn't be appropriate. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, you've got to be professional, but you're not always treated professionally. Yeah. Okay. Good. I'm going to move on to the next question. Yeah, the next question is coming up, and for this I received 376 individual responses. Again, I'll ask you the question. I'll let you comment in the comment box before I show you some real answers that I got from the survey. Yes, Sandra. Yeah, it's not the students that you worry about. It's maybe the managers or the owner of the school or somebody else or some other thing that's going on behind the scenes. So I'd like you to draw your attention on this question now, which is about coping mechanisms or tactics. Do you employ any tactics, as far as you know, or coping mechanisms? Now, this really was geared to the people that had said they'd either suffered from either a diagnosed or an undiagnosed mental health issue. But you could answer this question if you have had stress or anxiety, even if you've generally coped. What are the ways? I mean, this whole series is about not just the problems, but maybe some solutions or some way to go forward and to plan for dealing with difficult circumstances. Okay, meditation, yeah, yoga, meditation, yeah. I think Ushaka's giving a talk about meditation in this series. Yeah, hide in my office, yeah, with a drink. Getting frazzled. Yeah, recognize if you recognize the signs, it's very important as well. Not just because if you don't recognize the signs or the symptoms, then you may not be able to treat it or deal with it. Sleeps. Yeah, very important. Music, physical exercise. Physical exercise. If you don't look after yourself physically, then physical and mental well-being are intertwined. You can't really separate them. They don't separate. They're not separate beasts. They work together. One can affect the other. Sleep. Yeah, reading. Having something that's completely nothing to do with your teaching or the people you work with. Having something completely separate is often people's tactic or way to deal with it. I'm going to share some of the actual responses that I got from survey. I've kept some short quotes, rather than the life stories that some people have given me. And I'll let you read these. There's 6 in all. Again, feel free to comment in the chat box if any of these resonate with you or make you think about, yeah, that too. Yeah, 1, 2, 3 says good friends who will listen and then get you to laugh at yourself in the nicest possible way. Friends are very important, and a good friend will be just that. They will be supportive and able to listen to you. It's not just about talking, it's also about listening, of course. Yeah, just complaining isn't enough. Yeah, if you don't feel well, some people said, well, if you don't feel well, do something about it. It's an issue for your own well-being. Some people have left jobs early because they've not felt right. They've not felt well mentally in the right place in what they're doing. Yeah, these are all coping mechanisms. We're talking at the moment about coping mechanisms. The next question will move it on slightly, but it's going to be connected. The next question. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Yeah, I struggled with it as well, Nick. I've tried it a few times. I've been there, tried it. When I was first in the Priory in 2012, they tried me on a course of CBT. I just didn't have the patience for it or the wherewithal to see it through, because it was all about writing down hotspots and keeping a diary of every single thing, and it made me more anxious than not really. Yeah, sleeping and laughing. Yeah, watch a good comedy, watch a good film. Yeah. Okay, the next question is connected to this, and a lot of people answered the next question in the same way they answered the previous question, or there were a lot of interchangeable answers here, because I was mostly focusing on coping mechanisms before, and this was more of a general question about what ways do you look after your own mental well-being. So again, I'll give you some time to think about that. Maybe you can carry on commenting about the previous question, talking about coping mechanisms, or just more general ways to look after your own mental well-being. Yeah, it wasn't just you, Nick. I struggled with it. Yeah, having a life that's got nothing to do with teaching is I think not essential, but pretty important. If you can do that, it's good. Have a break. You don't live to work. You work to live. I know some people are workaholics, but it can drive you insane. Good. Well, so teaching is the escape, Mary. Okay, great. I relax when I'm teaching. Yeah, if it's going well, yeah, why not? Yeah, this is the kind of things: fresh air, exercise, physical, look after your physical self, music, getting away, doing something different, not having it 24/7, thinking about teaching and your job, and that's too much. Your well-being is more important than anything else. If we value ourselves as people and organizations value us as people, then that should be encouraged. Healthy diet, yeah, don't underestimate healthy diet. Some people I know for a fact have to look after what they eat. Either they have a diagnosed condition which they have to look after exactly what they eat and take care of that, and you have to make sure that you're eating the right vitamins, proteins, if you can, not living off junk food. I worked in Saudi Arabia, and a lot of the students live off junk food, some of the teachers too. Yeah, sing, short walks, turning off the cell phone in the evening. Yeah, try not to be a perfectionist. Yes, Kieran, I've been guilty of that. Keep off ELT social media. Yeah, sometimes you go online on social media, if you follow certain groups, and I mean, sometimes I get too many notifications. You have to turn them off sometimes. Yeah, good night's sleep, meditation, socializing. Yeah, a lot of people in the previous question said drinking was a coping mechanism. I mean, an alcoholic drinking, that is what I mean. And I would definitely define that as a coping mechanism. It can be also, a way to relax, but like everything in moderation, I would suggest. Let's just show you some of the answers from the survey. Getting some of those up. There we go. And I'll let you read those and comment on those while I keep an eye on the chat in the corner. Yeah, it's an interesting point, Claire. You've mentioned the idea that some of these things are preventative, so taking steps to prevent or at least to ward off the potential of falling ill or being unwell. And coping mechanisms, often people use those when they haven't planned or they haven't put things in place. Yeah. Yeah. Wandering mind, Mary. Yeah, that's true for a lot of people. Yeah, learning something new. Try and list things at the end of the day that went really well. Yeah, if you can do that. Mindfulness is something. I mean, I mentioned previously and before meditation and mindfulness. I got a mindfulness book, this one, and I think in one of the later sessions, it's going to be dealt with by Shapa as a way to cope. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to move things on to just very, very briefly look at some of the other questions. Now, I haven't really got time to go into these today, and I can only allow a few minutes. Now, these are quite in-depth questions that probably need a very detailed response. So far, we've looked at the individual picture and what they can do, what they suffer from, and what they could do to prevent or deal with mental health issues. These are more structural things. These are more about the organisation, so the other person that is involved when dealing with somebody with a mental health condition in the workplace. Okay, there's 3 questions. So you may want to pick one of those and comment, but I'm conscious of time, and we haven't got a long time to deal with each of these in detail. But these were questions from the survey, later questions. Yeah, if you've been through poor mental health, you generally can recognise when things are going that way again. Let's not forget something. I say poor mental health. You're not suffering from mental health because there's such a thing as positive mental health. Let's not forget there's the connotations here. We think of poor mental health, but also positive health. It's a flip, and you can have good, positive well-being as well. Yeah. Again, I've received hundreds of responses to each of these questions, and again, a lot of people gave me essays. Somebody wrote over 250 words just for one of these questions, and bear in mind that I had 500 responses. Imagine the sort of daunting task of one person, myself, going through all of these responses. Kieran, I feel that I'm reaching good. Yeah. Yeah, so recognizing symptoms of poor mental health in teachers without having specific training. I can't think of anybody that has had specific training on this issue. They may have had well-being sessions, professional development sessions, a week off when this was covered by the organisation. I'm sure that does happen. But specifically about training for mental health. I mean, I once did a first aid course for Mind. This is the pack I received all the information. This was a mental health first aid training course. I did it 4 years ago now in Norwich. It was 2 days. And I knew some things, but I learned more about what happens with people that have schizophrenia or people that suffer from bipolar or have a diagnosed psychosis or suffering from a psychosis. What are the signs, what are the symptoms, as Kieran was alluding to, that you look out for in that? Anyway, I highly recommend it. Yeah, most employers are not equipped to deal with this. That's correct. Yeah. More general strategies managers can implement. Yeah. Again, because I'm conscious of time, I will be writing up these responses as well. So the questions that you've seen and these questions, which are the remaining 3 questions in my survey, I haven't had time to go and write up all of the responses. But I will do. And yeah. Okay. Where am I going to? I'll tell you in the next slide. I'm coming to the end now. So what I'm going to do is tell you what I'm going to do in the near future. Okay, right. I'm going to just go to the next slide and thank you for listening to take part. Basically, that's the end. But if we have time, then I will take some questions in a moment. But just to say that I will be completing my write-up of my research findings, and I'll be publishing them on my blog, which is there. That's the blog there. If I can move the cursor, and it will be coincided with a talk that I'm giving at the ITFL conference in Brighton next month, Tuesday the 10th of April. So I'll publish it on that day. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, TeacherPhilly @TeacherPhilly. Maybe I can type it in the chat box. That's me. Then you may get a notification when I publish that if you are interested in that. I'm going to just check with Sean whether we've got time for any questions. Oh, before I go, I must thank not only Sean for doing this webinar, but I need to thank Kieran, who's in the room, Kieran Donaghy, who's attending today, and Sarah Mercer, who's on a plane, I believe, to Dubai as we speak. So she couldn't take part, but she's giving the next webinar next week. Which I fully recommend because she's fabulous, and she was the person that inspired me to give a talk at ITFL conference because following her talk at Glasgow last year, and just some references, some pictures, and the Chris Eyre book. So yeah, I think we've got a bit of time for questions. I'm in Sean's hands here. It's for me.
Yeah, there's plenty of time if people want to ask.
Oh, okay. I just thought we had an hour. That's all.
Well, you have, but I don't want to rush you.
Okay. Yeah, heart's going. I put a link to the slides if anyone's interested. Some people are interested. Thank you, Kieran. Thank you. And thank you for all your support so far. And I'll see you in Brighton. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, 123. Thank you, Alejandra. Alejandra? Apologies for pronunciation. Yes, Sandra, I am familiar with the ELT2 movement. I've signed up to that. I've given my written support. I've given my support to it. Yeah. Harassment is something that's been ongoing for a long time, and it's good to these things are now being talked about. I mean, there's more than